Making a difference is what you can do if you commit to travelling to Canberra. If you're in Canberra, simply going to Parliament House. And if we can't eclipse what happened in March when we had 4,000 gather around Parliament House, we will lose this fight. We must make a bigger stand and rock the Prime Minister's boat one final time.
2GB's Chris Smith spruiking a no-carbon tax rally planned for next month. But as the ABC's Alison Carabine asked his boss last week,
is it really the role of a media outlet to try and influence policy like this? The traditional role of the media is to cover a political issue such as the carbon tax, not to try and kill it off.
I don't think he's trying to kill anything off. I think he's just made a statement which is probably quite factual. 2GB
Programme Director Ian Holland obviously doesn't listen all that carefully to his afternoon broadcaster Chris Smith. And who can blame him? Welcome to Mediawatch, I'm Jonathan Holmes. And suddenly, I don't feel alone. In the wake of the News of the World scandal in Britain, the role of the media here in Australia became the topic of the week.
Today, I wanted to talk about the need for a full inquiry into the media, both ownership and regulation.
And I will be happy to sit down with parliamentarians and discuss that review that people are obviously contemplating.
And it hasn't only been politicians thinking about the issue. Witness this remarkable question about media coverage of the carbon tax debate, put to the Prime Minister at the National Press Club by 7 News' political editor, Mark Riley.
I think a few of us have been reflecting on this in the last few weeks and certainly in the last couple of days very sharply on our responsibilities. When we see a gentleman in Gladstone trying to encourage people to take up arms against the government, and then a radio station coming here and broadcasting all day in the first day back of Parliament to whip climate change opposers into a frenzy. How do you see our responsibility and the way that we should be reporting this matter?
Before we get to Julia Gillard's answer, let's just stay with the question for a bit. You remember the no carbon tax rally in Canberra last March with all those charming posters? 2GB's presenters urged their listeners to go to that one too, and Chris Smith broadcast live from the event. On his afternoon programme last Thursday, Smith greeted Mark Riley's question to Julia Gillard with astonished outrage.
What side is Mark Riley on here? Makes you wonder whether he wants to be part of a media that appreciates both sides of the argument. Isn't that what the media, news media, is supposed to be all focused on?
Mind you, as he made clear next day, Chris Smith has no obligation at all to appreciate both sides of the argument.
I am paid to express opinions on this program. I'm not a member of the Journalists Association. I don't work in a newsroom as an objective reporter.
Fair enough, but is he paid to help organise political rallies? And what sort of opinions about the Prime Minister, whether expressed by him or his listeners, are OK? Last week, his boss Ian Holland told ABC Radio National that there was nothing inflammatory about them.
I don't think so. I think that the opinions that we've expressed have been factual.
Really? Factual like this?
Look, I can say this, but you can't. She's a menopausal monster, and she needs to resign.
OK. Good on you, Benita. Thank you.
Good on you, Benita. Breakfast host Alan Jones likes to air his listeners' factual opinions about Julia Gillard too, like this email from Colin.
Another one says, please, don't have that lying bitch on your program again. I had to move the dial to another station. I guess it was worth the once to show us all what a beep lying, beep backstabbing, beep treacherous, beep she is. Thanks, Colin.
A couple of hours later, Tony called in.
The Australian taxpayer even pays for the toilet paper she uses. Does she go down to the chemist to buy the tampons? Or is the Australian taxpayer paying for those as well? In my opinion, Julia Gillard is a piece of crap.
OK, we made a lot of valid points there. We've just got to avoid, in our criticism, the personal. We stick to the policy. We never deal with the personal.
Never. Alan never deals with the personal. Strictly policy.
That fool Windsor wanted broadband. That idiot Wilkie in Tasmania wanted poker machine reform.
They've struck a tax which is half of what that fool Garno said it should be. What about this brain-dead Sarah Hanson-Young from the Greens? You dope, Clover Moore. You dyed-in-the-wool dope.
Clover Moore is the Lord Mayor of Sydney, and Alan Jones would like to
put her in the same chaff bag as Julia Gillard and throw them both out to sea.
Alan liked that factual opinion. A week later, he put the Prime Minister in the bag again.
It is absolutely laughable. The woman's off her tree. And quite frankly, they should shove her and Bob Brown in a chaff bag and take them as far out to sea as they can and tell them to swim home.
Nothing inflammatory about that. Even more bizarre is Ian Holland's insistence that at 2GB...
We have tried very, very hard to get to ensure that what we do is balanced. We always do.
I'm left almost speechless, a condition that never afflicts Alan Jones. Here's how he relays to his listeners information from a source most people would regard as trustworthy.
This is more Treasury modelling, showing that real national income will grow. Grow by 1.1% a year under the carbon tax. Treasury modelling. They got them everywhere, haven't they? They got all the little mates everywhere, trotting out the figures. Look, you can't take these people seriously. It is rubbish, and it's a hoax.
And so it goes on, day after day. Yes, Julia Gillard has gone back on an election pledge. Yes, there are good reasons to be sceptical about the carbon tax policy. Yes, it's unpopular. Yes, Jones and his colleagues have a right to their opinions. But this is a serious issue, and Mr. Holland, what your station does is not balanced coverage. Now, let's go back to that question from Seven's Mark Riley at the National Press Club, and to the answer he got.
How do you see our responsibility and the way that we should be reporting this matter?
I think we will have a long debate about media ethics in this country, but if I could put it as clearly as I can, I'd say to you, don't write crap. Can't be that hard.
You'll notice she didn't say don't talk crap. The shock jocks are a lost cause for Ms Gillard just now, and she knows it. She and her government are talking about News Limited newspapers, and especially, as Communications Minister Stephen Conroy made clear this morning, Sydney's Daily Telegraph.
The Daily Telegraph is probably the worst of the examples at the moment, where it is running a campaign. But the Daily Telegraph is interested in distorting the debate, is interested in demanding an election campaign purely intended to try and get rid of the government.
Of course, News Limited can argue that it's only reflecting the clear will of the public.
Australia demands carbon tax poll.
Not happy, Julia.
Give us a say, Julia.
But arguably, the Daily Telegraph is going much further. Day after day, it reports all the bad news and none of the good news about the carbon tax. News Limited has a professional conduct policy for its staff. In the wake of the News of the World scandal, News Limited CEO John Hartigan told them that
adherence to these codes is the guiding principle to everything we do.
Really? We only have time tonight to look at one of the code's provisions and how it was applied by the telly in 2 stories. Clause 1.3 of the News Limited Code reads,
Try always to tell all sides of the story in any kind of dispute.
Here's News Limited's national political correspondent Steve Lewis showing how that's done in a short report written last Sunday.
Thousands of jobs in coal mining, building, food manufacturing and other energy-intensive industries are threatened by the Gillard government's carbon tax reforms, Business Group said last night.
And Business Group's gloom was balanced by this.
But the ACTU and environmental groups immediately countered that the nation's employment future was bright under a low-carbon economy.
And at the end of the story, a quote from the Climate Institute's John Connor.
All the modelling shows that there is broad employment growth with significant cuts in pollution,
Mr Connor said.
At least that's how the story printed in the Adelaide Advertiser ended. Here's the same story under Steve Lewis's byline in the Daily Telegraph.
Old King Coal is in deep trouble.
There's a picture of 3 worried coal miners from New South Wales's Hunter Valley who
don't trust the government.
One of them, Greg Allen, gets 3 whole paragraphs that don't appear in the advertiser's version.
It will cost everyone, and it's not going to make one iota of difference to the environment. It's just another tax.
The telly has confirmed to Mediawatch that Steve Lewis didn't interview Mr. Allen.
A reporter from our Newcastle bureau did that interview to tie in.
To make room for it, the Climate Institute's John Connor was dropped. The result, a balanced report, became yet another telly scare story about the tax. Next day, Tony Abbott was in the Hunter Valley too, continuing his
crusade at coalface
in a coal mine owned by American giant Peabody Energy. There was a Butte picture story in the telly where Abbott's pessimism went unchallenged.
For people in the coal industry, it's a hit on potential employment, and it's going to be a hit on your standard of living.
But what was the front page story in The Australian that day?
Miner bets $5 billion on future of coal.
The world's biggest coal miner has boosted Julia Gillard's efforts to sell her clean energy plan, signalling its confidence in the future of the industry.
Peabody Energy's bid to take over Queensland's Macarthur Coal was reported in every major News Limited tabloid as well that day, except the Daily Telegraph. It only reported it the following day, in a business story that led off,
more than $40 billion has been wiped off the Australian share market since Carbon Sunday.
As the picture caption put it,
gloom. A takeover bid for Queensland-based Macarthur Coal was the only bright spot for an otherwise depressed local share market yesterday.
That's the way to deal with awkward news. And it's all too typical of the telly's campaign, especially since Paul Whittaker, former editor of The Australian, took over. Is it unfair? I reckon it is. But as the polls track downwards for Labour, the telly's kept in sync with its market. No newspaper ever went broke, intensifying its readers' fears. And the problem is this: any attempt to impose balance and fairness on newspapers by regulation would be worse than the disease. And it probably wouldn't work anyway. After all, the broadcasting regulator ACMA hasn't been able to stop talkback radio from becoming a swampland of insult and misrepresentation. The solution for newspapers like the telly, it seems to me, is just what Julia Gillard says it is. Stop writing crap. It can't be that hard. Until next week, good night.